It is 10:01. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. The Nashville Predators stole the show on day one of NHL free agency, bringing in multiple star players, including Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and defenseman Brady Shea on multi-year deals. The Preds also added backup goaltender Scott Wedgwood from Dallas. General Manager Barry Trotz met with the media yesterday and talked about the big-name signings and what they mean for the franchise.
Because it's a statement, I think, for the rest of the league that these players will come to Nashville. These players see what we're doing with our franchise. We have lots to offer, and we're very determined to win.
The U.S. men's national team crashed out of Copa America on Monday with a 1-0 loss to Uruguay, failing to advance out of the group stage. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Preds cooked all day yesterday. The U.S. men's national team absolutely did not. Good morning. Welcome in. We're happy to have you, Jackson Lucas and me, until 1 p.m. today. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to chime in on the international embarrassment, if you want to celebrate what the hockey team did yesterday and continues to look to do in free agency at this point, or if you're interested in having a discussion about Nashville being a legitimate destination for pro sports teams, for pro sports players, rather, and pro sports teams, depending on who you ask. We will be having all of those conversations throughout the course of the show. Good morning, boys. How's morale?
Low. Morale is low.
Oh, no.
Usually high, today low.
Okay, well, we will have plenty of time to address it. John Glennon will be here to recap the Preds situation. I'm sure Johnny will have some thoughts on the soccer itself, but I suppose that's the thing that most people paid attention to last night, and that is the place that we will start, as Lucas said in his update. Crashing out of Copa America whilst hosting Copa America in front of thousands of people packing into Arrowhead Stadium. Last night, the U.S. men's team not favored nor expected necessarily to beat Uruguay, but to be eliminated before the knockout stage and to have that Panama loss beforehand really seems to have soured the entire experience. There are hashtags on the internet, gentlemen. Berhalter out. Whether or not it has the intended effect remains to be seen. That seems to be the most popular opinion today, though, and if you were listening to the broadcast and watching from outer space, I believe we have a satellite feed.
For the first half, yes, they were broadcasting from the moon, it looked like. And then the second half was a regular game cam that we're accustomed to in an NFL stadium.
The game is the most important thing today. But that first half, and thank God Fox made the adjustment, because it's my understanding, and I think I saw a tweet from Will where he said they were getting Fox was getting an international feed, so that wasn't necessarily
correct
in their control. But I just think it's so hard to take you seriously if you're not going to take the broadcast seriously. But that's another conversation for a different day.
Indeed.
So, Greg Berhalter has been a polarizing figure, and he seems to have fans of the U.S. men, just American soccer, seems to have basically everybody but the people in his own locker room wanting to run him out. We're going to get to some Alexi Lalas audio from the Fox post game here in just a second, but I want to start with Lucas, I guess, first, because you are the foremost soccer expert, voice of Nashville Soccer Club. Your analysis is far more valid based on my afternoon on the internet yesterday when it comes to international soccer and how big of an embarrassment this actually is. Again, not so much because of the loss yesterday, but because of the experience on the whole and how short-lived it was.
First of all, quick context. This competition, Copa America, Typically, it is a South American competition. The Federation CONMEBOL, which is the governing body of South American soccer, every 4 years plays Copa America, an international competition with all South American teams that qualify. Because of money and other things, they are combining North and South America now and making Copa America, at least this year, in the United States, where the U.S., Panama, Mexico, Canada all qualified to play CONMEBOL teams, South American teams. So, in a lot of ways, this was a dress rehearsal for the United States for the 2026 World Cup, right? So that's the context of the competition. Why should you care about this disastrous result? Because in 2 years, almost exactly, the biggest sporting event on planet Earth is coming to the United States. And the goal is to not totally embarrass ourselves symbolically the way the United States did last night.
Symbolically.
And prior to last night, I want to say Thursday, against Panama in a 2-1 loss in the group stage, where if the U.S. had just taken care of business against Panama, an opponent they are very familiar with, a member of CONCACAF, the North American Federation, then we would not be having this discussion right now. The U.S. would be on to the knockout rounds. You know the context of the Berhalter stuff, right?
Do.
He stabilized U.S. soccer at a time where it hit rock bottom, did not qualify for the 2018 World Cup. He came in, kind of got it back to the mean in terms of beating Mexico on a somewhat regular basis, qualifying for the 2022 World Cup. And then the turmoil that followed the 2022 World Cup. We're not going to get into the crazy scandal that was Berhalter and an incident with his wife in the 90s. And
Can't we, though? It's excellent. It was excellent drama.
And the way it ties into one of his players and his players' parents that were close to Berhalter and his wife, and a crazy scandal that was born out of the 2022 World Cup and the playing time that Gio Reyna did not receive. Go look that up if you haven't seen.
It was fun.
Berhalter's contract was up after that, and it looked like there was no way back. There was an interim period where B.J. Callahan took over as the interim manager, and the U.S. looked fantastic. For 3 months last year, they were playing their most attractive soccer. They won the Nations League, which is basically a made-up tournament with North American teams. And B.J. Callahan, by the way, who has been reported as the biggest target for Nashville Soccer Club and its new opening. We'll see if there's a resolution on that soon, but that's besides the point. Berhalter ended up being rehired and led the U.S. into Copa America. They beat Bolivia in the first game, looked good. Christian Pulisic looked fantastic. Was a 2-0 win, could have been 3-0, could have been 4-0 very easily. They go into the Panama game last week, get an early red card. They looked immature. They did not look up for the moment. They looked frustrated. They lose to Panama, which they had no business doing on home soil. And then last night, 1-0, the loss to Uruguay.
So we have some Urban Dictionary results of shambolic, the word Lucas used recently. Messy, on the verge of going to shambles, or something that is symbolic of a sham. Which one were you going for, bud?
Oh, all the above.
I think all can be applicable in that sense.
Would you like it used in a sentence?
From Urban Dictionary? With great caution, yes.
Careful.
In a strange, unintended, and utterly shambolic way, Beckham's embarrassing absence in his first year actually prolonged his honeymoon period.
Interesting.
Shambolic.
Shambolic, say it like it's a spelling bee.
Thank you, Jackson.
Would you like me to spell it?
No, that's okay.
So, the question is not if, but when that American soccer finds a new manager for the U.S. men's national team, correct? Like we are just now playing a waiting game. Greg Berhalter still remains the coach of the U.S. men's national team at this moment at 10:09 a.m. Central Time, but we are playing a when, not if game, correct?
Well, we hope so.
Lucas?
I thought we were playing this game last year. Last year, it felt like there was no way back for Greg Berhalter, and there was a way back. So we will see. You went into last night's game with an interesting conundrum in that if the U.S. were to beat Uruguay, it would be the signature win of the Berhalter era.
We'll get to that.
And if the U.S. were to lose to Uruguay and crash out of the group stage, it would be the bottoming out of the Berhalter era. No in between. Of course, we ended up with the latter. And perhaps the biggest indictment on Berhalter last night is if Bolivia and Panama had tied in the other group stage game.
Lucas, I could not believe what I was watching.
I know.
I thought it was a joke. I thought they were screwing with me on the internet. I had to double take on
me
Twitter.
Me too. No, I had to triple check to make sure this actually happened. If Bolivia and Panama had tied and the U.S. and Uruguay had tied, U.S. would have been tied on points with Panama and gone through on goal differential. In the 65th minute, when Uruguay is lining up for a set piece, a free kick, Berhalter is informing his players. You can see it. He's holding up 2 1s, and he's mouthing 1-1. He is updating them on the score to the Bolivia-Panama game. Never mind the fact that he's taking their focus away from that moment, which Uruguay scored literally seconds later. But he's doing it with a good 20 minutes left in the Bolivia-Panama game, as if it was already over and you're good. All you need here is a draw.
It's crazy.
It was malpractice. I couldn't believe what I was watching with that.
So you get the chance of fire Greg pretty resoundingly, even if you were listening or just watching on the broadcast throughout the course of it. And you get the reaction of several very, very credible broadcasters now working for Fox in their pre- and post-game coverage for Alexi Lalas and Clint Dempsey, who are on the desk reacting to the loss after the fact. And again, it's not so much about the loss yesterday, because it seems, and you know, there's some conspiracy theories that I noticed on the internet being floated about just leaving, that they planned to fire Berhalter after the Panama loss, but they said, just leave him in there against Uruguay and let's finish the job. Things like that, which I don't think many U.S. soccer fans would be that upset about. But Alexi Lalas, I think, summed it up better than anybody else I've heard give an opinion, anybody credible giving an opinion on this particular situation. And this was his commentary courtesy of the Fox Sports broadcast last night.
You talked about learning from losing, okay? I think what we have learned over these cycles is that this team is not able to do anything better than is done in the past. And that hurts. That hurts to say, because that was not what was promised and not what, for many, we believed was going to happen with this team. Because if this is as good as it gets, it's not good enough. And there's plenty of excuses, but they don't matter. You can talk about opportunities. Well, we got players that are playing all over the world. Talk about playing in Europe. Well, the entire team that you saw out there plays in Europe, so it's not MLS's fault. You can talk about, the pathways and the resources that they have. No generation has been given more. And yet this generation hasn't lived up to that bargain. And when it comes to Greg Berhalter, we heard Stu Holden say it's exactly right. I know there's a sport in firing coaches in all professional sports. And I know the knives are out, and they should be, because this is not good enough from Greg Berhalter. And you have to ask yourself, with 2026 coming barreling down the pike, it's going to come real quick.
Less than 2 years away.
All right? We can't afford to waste it. We can't afford to be embarrassed. And we can't afford to arrive in the summer of 26 with a team that has not progressed, that has not evolved, and has not improved. And I'm sure if Greg Berhalter was here, he would say, oh, but you don't see what's happening inside. I don't give a crap what is happening inside. I don't care about the dynamic. I don't care how much your players love you. I don't care how kumbaya it is. All I care about is I see a U.S. men's national team that is better than before. And we haven't seen that, and that's a problem going forward.
Is that on the players? Is that on the manager? Is that on the federation? Where are we saying you need to be better?
Well, the players certainly need to be better,
Do you think this generation of players has what it takes? Like, do you think that they have that deep inside of them?
I think there's a couple of them. I think they are better soccer players, but ultimately I don't think that they're better U.S. men's national team players.
That is Alexi Lalas, among several other people on the Fox Sports post-game last night. John Glennon of the Nashville Post is going to join us. Johnny, infinitely familiar with the beautiful game, so we'll get his opinions on not just that, but also the Preds free agency haul, because that is the top line outside of the U.S. men's national team embarrassment in Copa America today. John Glennon will join us coming up next. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. Johnny Glennon is kind enough to make some time for us today. Of course, you can read him at the Nashville Post. You can hear the podcast that John hosts on the Believe Network. I Believe in Titans, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, and review. Johnny, I think it's been a while since we've had you on the radio show. I know it would bother you for the podcast all the time, but thanks for stopping by, bud.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So are you also planning to defect to another country after the results of the U.S. men's national team, as Lucas is plotting during the break to return to Brazil?
Yeah, it's a good move by Lucas. I don't know if I have the same option. My roots are Irish, so I don't see us dominating the world soccer scene anytime soon there. But yeah, for any U.S. soccer fan, another disappointing performance for sure. Odds were kind of stacked last night against them, but still, you wanted to see more. You wanted to see more scoring chances. You wanted to see him make a real run at getting that last spot, and it just didn't happen. And now I think we're all kind of waiting for what seems to be the inevitable, which would be the relieving of duties of head coach Greg Berhalter, which I have to believe is going to happen.
Well, that certainly has been a feeling previously, which Lucas has expressed his lack of outright optimism about, but we will see. So we're not having you on today because of your soccer knowledge, though your soccer knowledge is always appreciated. The Nashville Predators were very, very active in the opening day of free agency. 4 significant contracts handed out, a lot of star power, increased depth in net. What would you say about the work that Barry Trotz has done on the first day of Preds free agency, of NHL free agency?
I think, extremely impressive, is really the only way to describe it. When you think about the fact that also, the Predators were going in with about $12 million in what could basically be referred to as dead cap money, the money they used to pay off Matt Duchene in a buyout, and the money they held in the Ryan Johansson trade. So despite having that issue, they went out and signed 4 guys for a total of about $112 million. And as you said, they added some real pop to that offense. You look at last year's Predators team, not bad during the regular season in terms of scoring. They finished 10th, but really offense was a real issue in the playoffs, especially. 12 goals in 6 games. The second line was fairly non-existent at times. So they really addressed the issue there. You get a 7-time 40-goal scorer in Steven Stamkos. You get a 3-time 30-goal scorer in Jonathan Marchessault. And then defensively, you basically replace Ryan McDonough. The Preds traded recently. They replace him basically with Brady Shea, who can be a top 4, perhaps top 2 defenseman. So I would say pretty impressive work by one Barry Trotz.
John Glennon of the Nashville Post is here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're recapping the Preds free agency haul of the players that they did acquire, Johnny. And I don't know how much you had insight on what they might do beforehand, how early they were in contact with some of these guys, because it sounds like as early as March, the Preds were expressing some level of interest in at least Steven Stamkos, who I guess was pretty unhappy with the level of contract extension talks that were happening in Tampa Bay as his deal was getting ready to expire. But among the players that they did acquire, who was the most important acquisition?
It's hard to say that Stamkos was not. You could make an argument perhaps for either of the other two, really, because Shea, is a 7-year guy right now. And as I say, he may end up pairing with Roman Josi, on the top defensive pairing. Jonathan Marchessault is a guy who won the Conn Smythe Trophy as a playoff MVP, led the Knights to the Stanley Cup in 2023. But in terms of the total package you're getting from Steven Stamkos, you're getting, as I say, 7-time 40-goal scorer, 40 goals in 2 of the last 3 years, a 10-year captain for the Lightning, and he led Tampa Bay to back-to-back Stanley Cups. So, and in addition, as I mentioned, the Predators' power play, was a real weak spot last year. Well, enter Steven Stamkos, who had 19 power play goals last year, which was 3rd in the NHL. So, hard to say, Stamkos isn't above the other guys right there. All of them were good, but when you take that whole package that Stamkos is bringing here, and add it to what Nashville already has, a pretty solid team, that really improves the outlook going into next year.
John, we've had this conversation in multiple areas with the Titans. Is it the best cornerback room of the Titans era, the best wide receiver room of the Titans era? Let's move it over to the Preds. On paper, could you make an argument that this is the most talented in terms of overall resume Preds roster since the Nashville Predators became an NHL franchise?
You can certainly make that argument, and by the same count, you could certainly say that yesterday was maybe the single most significant day in the Predators franchise history as well, and Barry Trotz was specifically asked that, and the examples he used in comparison were the time in 2005 they signed Paul Correa, who was a future Hall of Famer, and really kind of picked the Preds out of nowhere at that point, and really kind of made a name for the Nashville franchise in that way. And he also said in 2012. When the Predators matched the offer sheet, Philadelphia's offer sheet for Shea Weber, 14 years, $110 million, that was a huge step for the franchise as well. But yeah, in terms of the sheer amount of talent now, there were some years, probably in those the late aughts, I guess, as you might refer to it, when they had a lot of talented players. Some were on the rise. They were able to bring in some talented veterans here as well. There was, Jason Arnott was there, Steve Sullivan, Paul Correa, Scott Hartnell, Kimmo Timonen was on defense along with, Shea Weber, etc. There were a couple of years that they were pretty talented, but I think in terms of overall and in terms of veteran experience, in terms of leadership, everything, I would think you're on target there by saying this is probably the best of the bunch, especially now with those two additional forwards when you look at the forward crop.
Any concern, any hesitancy at all with specifically, and I kept butchering his name yesterday, Johnny, Marchessault and Stamkos' age, being both north of 30 at this point in their careers. I know hockey players can last a hell of a lot longer than I think they should last, but still, anything in the back of your head about the age of the two of them?
I think that is a reasonable question to ask. I think that's certainly an understandable concern. Hockey players do age a little better than, say, football players, where you're already talking about, hey, you're 30 years old, are you over the hill now? Or hockey players generally can play into their 30s, and some will into their 30s as well. But I think if you're talking about right the here and now, when you look at these guys and the numbers they're bringing to the table, like Stamkos, as I said last year, was his seventh 40-goal season. His last 3 years, 106 points, 84 points, 81 points. So he is still bringing it right now. You look at Marchessault, career best 42 goals last year. His 69 points were second in his career, despite the fact he's 33. And Brady Shea is 30 as well. But, I think he had a career year last year as well with 47 points, and he's really upped his point production last 2 or 3 years. So really right now, you cannot make an argument that any of the guys are suffering from, a decline. Now, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line could be a different story, and I think the Predators will worry about that when it comes. But in the here and now, I think these guys are still playing just as well as they ever have.
Yeah, I think that, there's some comments as we live stream today on YouTube about why didn't the Lightning want to pay this guy as being one of the primary questions around Stamkos, but still understanding that they invested as well yesterday in a couple of sizable contracts while letting Stamkos go to the Predators. And I think it all kind of made sense based on how much time he had already been with the franchise and kind of where they are in their trajectory as they try to get back to a more relevant place from where they have been winning cups on a regular basis. John Glennon, columnist for the Nashville Post, is here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're talking about the Preds free agency haul. NashvillePost.com is, of course, where you can read him. He has all kinds of great updates and analysis on not just the Preds, but he's covering NASCAR, he's covering the Titans, he's covering all local sports for NashvillePost.com. Trotz, the GM, we are now a full year into him being named, I believe, the GM exclusively, with Poyle taking a back seat while still working with the organization, but being out of the general manager role. How would you describe the first year of Barry Trotz on the personnel side?
I would describe Barry Trotz in very different words than I probably would have described him as a coach many years ago. Some of the words that come to mind are, bold, decisive, risk taker, go-getter. This is the second year in a row that he just bolted straight out of the gates and signed 3 top free agents right away. And just as an example of kind of the guys that were signed yesterday for people that may not be as familiar with the names, in any sport, publications list, hey, what are the top free agents available, going into the off season? Well, when you look at the guys that the Predators got yesterday, the Athletic had the 3 Predators guys. Those 3 were in their top 7 of all free agents available. Sportsnet had those 3 guys in their top 10 of all free agents available, and TSN's top 12 had Stamkos and Marchessault in their top 12. So it's not just local hype or the Predators trying to build these guys up as big signings. I mean, it's very much legitimate. But yeah, again, going back to Barry Trotz, as a coach, he was very, a meticulous guy. He was detailed. He was a planner. I wouldn't describe him necessarily in any way as a big risk taker, as a bold, decisive action taker. But whether it is simply a change of roles to general manager, which includes now different circumstances, the Preds have much more money than they did back in the day. He is much more of an aggressive move maker than I would have guessed based on his track record as a coach, which is obviously a different role. But he is a man who has shown he is ready to get after it. That's for sure.
Yesterday in his press conference, John Trotz kind of laid out the boxes that need to be checked in order to be a Stanley Cup contender. Obviously, he would know, being a part of a Stanley Cup title-winning team with the Capitals, elite goaltending, an elite defenseman, elite top-line scorers, and elite depth. Now, those first 3, I think we can pretty assuredly check those boxes. How do you sum up where the Preds are in terms of depth at this point after yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of long-term depth, I know the recent rankings by The Athletic, for instance, on the prospect pool had the Predators, I believe, either 8th or 10th of all the teams in the league. So it's a good amount of prospects that are still coming. And I think the Predators have, 3, 4, 5 guys in Milwaukee right now that are maybe a year or part of a year away from kind of pushing themselves into roles with the Nashville team. But I think it's pretty good depth with the team, and really when you add, what happens when you add guys like you did yesterday in Stamkos, Marchessault, you're adding 2/3 of a line, and of course that has the domino effect, pushing everybody down a line, and all of a sudden the responsibilities of maybe a guy, for instance, like a Tommy Novak, who is probably a little above his head last year, playing kind of a second line center for a lot of times. Well, all of a sudden, he makes a whole lot more sense in a 3rd or 4th line role. So, when you add guys to the top of that roster and then push other guys down, that boosts the depth right there as well, too. So, I think the Predators, really, they haven't given up a ton, in the offseason that they hold near and dear. As I said, probably the biggest offseason move was the trade of Ryan McDonagh, and really they replaced him yesterday when they signed Brady Shea.
So UC Saros locked in. Do you buy that Wedgwood and Askarov will be in a legitimate competition for that number 2 role? And whoever wins that number 2 role, could that have a legitimate impact on the amount of games UC Saros plays next season? Maybe if it's Wedgwood and Saros is able to take somewhat of a step back in terms of his workload, and if it's Askarov, he sort of continues on the same path. Do you think there's any credence to that?
Yeah, that's the Askarov question still remains, certainly after this past weekend, and his future, I would say, you'd have to say, got that much cloudier anytime the goalie in front of you, UC Saros, signs an 8-year contract extension. He's not going anywhere soon. So yeah, Barry Trotz indicated at this moment anyway, it's going to be a training camp battle, as you said, between Askarov and the newly signed veteran Scott Wedgwood for a backup role. But, I mean, I'm sure, and Barry Trotz mentioned this too yesterday, his phone is ringing. Because it's clear when you sign UC Saros to an 8-year deal, Askarov is likely not going to be a long-term solution here in Nashville as well. And the fact remains that Nashville can pick up some valuable assets for him, whether it's a current roster player or a top prospect. Certainly he could be moved. So, you don't rule that out, even though Trotz said he doesn't feel in any hurry to do so. But, I mean, I kind of lean right now to them using Wedgwood at least to start the season as the NHL backup. And one reason for that is, as we discussed here, UC Saros is a guy who likes to play and does play a tremendous amount of games. He's played over 60 games the last 3 years, and really hasn't been much, hasn't been too worn down as the season moved along either. So if you want one of your top prospects, Yaroslav Askarov, to play a lot, maybe you're better off actually putting him down in the AHL again, letting him play a ton of games as a starter there, as opposed to sitting on the bench for 80% of the time in Nashville behind UC Saros. But it's a very interesting dynamic right now, very interesting scenario. I'll be interested to see how it works out with Yaroslav Askarov.
John Glennon of the Nashville Post here with us on 104.5 The Zone. You can also check out Johnny's work on the Titans, on the I Believe in Titans podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast. So to that point, Johnny, between the two, I know there's not only two pro sports franchises in Nashville, but between the two primary pro sports franchises in this city, they have spent a considerable amount of money on talent acquisition this offseason. We had the conversation about yesterday, the Preds being obviously closer to a level of competitiveness that would make you consider them a contender. But the parallels between Rand Carthon right now and Barry Trotz and the work that both of their organizations are doing seems to have Nashville sports fans in about as good a place mentally as I can remember.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you can certainly draw a lot of parallels between the two because, it wasn't as if either of these two franchises just threw dollars randomly at good players. They each addressed critical needs. You look at the Titans, obviously, you say, what were their huge needs after last year? Well, the left tackle was the biggest. They got him in the draft. But in terms of free agency and through trades, they needed to improve the wide receiver position. They got Ridley, they got Boyd, cornerback, they got Snead, they got Awuzie, and the Predators too. What were their issues last year? They needed more offense. They needed more power play goals. They went after those guys and signed them yesterday, and it should be a big boost. Both the teams weren't afraid to spend. You do see teams that have plenty of money and don't necessarily feel a need to use it all. They want to save it for various reasons. Both franchises said, "Hey, we've got some money. Let's get after it and let's make these teams better." And they did so. And I think both teams also, maybe the concern a little bit is, as we talked about earlier, when you sign free agents, there's always the risk. Okay, these guys are generally a little bit older, obviously. Down the line, are you going to have to worry about production? Down the line, are you going to be worried about what their contract status is? But I think those will be some concerns. But I think in the immediate future, in the present right here, I think, as you said, I think fans have to be pretty excited about the level of activity in both franchises.
At Glennon Sports is where you can follow him. You can read him at NashvillePost.com. He is Johnny Glennon, and he's good enough to give us some of his time here on this Tuesday morning. Thank you, John. I appreciate it, and we'll have you back on soon enough. We'll try not to bother you too often, but sooner rather than later.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
That's the main man, John Glennon, with us. Jackson, we have Oh No coming up next. Do I have things in the nebulous prize bucket that's useless to give away?
Yes, we have 2 tickets to see the Nashville Sounds take on the Iowa Cubs.
615-737-1045. All you have to do is tell me what in sports made you say, oh no. That's next. 615-737-1045. That's the number. You call in. You tell us what made you say, oh, no. I have a feeling that I may be, I'm not self-nominating, but I feel like I may make an appearance in this segment, unfortunately for me. If they have the best submission, Jackson, what, again, do they win?
2 tickets to see the Nashville Sounds take on the Iowa Cubs.
615-737-1045 is how you call for the opportunity to win. We were just talking amongst ourselves. I think we might go.
When is the game, Jackson?
1 second.
That's an important piece of information.
There's follow-ups that are necessary for that. So do the due diligence, and we'll go ahead and start the bidding. I will lead off at this point while Jackson finds the date for that. Jamarcus Russell is the thing that made me say, oh, no. Now, last week, I don't know if you missed this headline, but I believe it was Thursday or Friday, Jamarcus Russell, who famously, a number 1 overall pick, lasted, 3 years in the NFL and washed out very, very quickly, was recently removed from the coaching staff at an Alabama high school after he was allegedly involved in the misappropriation of funds. So, do we have a Brett Favre situation in our hands? Not quite to that extreme. No, grandiose volleyball facilities were built with ill-gotten gains, the way that Brett Favre was able to misappropriate money. But he was a volunteer, so not a head coach. I thought initially that he was the head coach at Williamson High School in Mobile, Alabama. But he's a volunteer assistant coach, and he's working at his alma mater. The lawsuit alleges that he took a $74,000 check that was earmarked as a donation to the high school and allegedly kept $74,000 that was supposed to go to his alma mater for himself. Jamarcus Russell made me say, oh no.
Goodness.
Tough.
That feels, what's worse? Is that worse, or is the Brett Favre thing worse?
No, the Favre thing.
The Favre thing's worse.
Because a poor state like Mississippi and getting the funds the way that Brett Favre went about it, by far and away worse. Yeah. Jamarcus Russell, a scumbag for this, allegedly.
But Brett Favre, who probably doesn't need the funds as bad, like Brett Favre could probably pony up something if he really wanted to get his daughter a new volleyball facility.
His damn Copperfit sleeves that he's been shelling on television for years should be able to pay for the volleyball facility.
That Wrangler money's still got to be coming in.
Somewhere. Unless he's fighting off, Richard Pick lawsuits that he, of course, was famously also entrapped in.
Yes.
Not entrapped, but
the law and the didn't he sue Pat McAfee recently?
I think so.
A lot of news around Brett Favre. It was tied to because Pat McAfee said something like Brett Favre hates poor people.
That's right.
My oh no is you, Buck. You will not disagree with anything I'm about to say. Let's use a metaphor. You are a moth, and instead of being attracted to a flame or a light, you are attracted to clout or scuttlebutt.
Yes.
And you don't care particularly about international soccer unless it's what the majority of people are caring about in that particular moment. Like last night when the U.S. falls 1-0 to Uruguay, bounced from the group stage of Copa America. Everybody's talking about it, talking about firing Berhalter. And you quote tweeted the U.S. men's national team official account with the final score graphic. Mm-hmm. And the content of the tweet from @BuckRising says, at least it was a defeat at the hands of international superpower, checks notes, Uruguay, ? Ignoring the fact that Uruguay is one of the most successful teams in the history of this competition, Copa America. They've won it 15 times, which is tied with Argentina. I can count on 2 hands the amount of teams that have won a World Cup. Uruguay has won 2 of them. Not since 1950, but still puts them in that category. The 3 or 4 best players in Uruguayan soccer history have achieved a level that no American player has ever even come close to. The likes of a Luis Suarez, Diego Forlan, Edinson Cavani, Diego Godin. I could go on. Uruguay has quality up and down their roster. They always do. Now, I do not blame you for looking at a country like Uruguay that's probably the size of North Carolina.
I checked to make sure it was Uruguay before I tweeted. I checked. That was the only notes apparently that I checked.
And wondering, there's no way that they are an international soccer power. Now, it is a fact. Uruguay is arguably the most overachieving soccer nation on the planet, but still, they are a legitimate soccer power with legitimate quality throughout the history of the world's game. So, Buck, you chiming in on something you do not know about for the clout, you are my oh no.
I just wanted to feel included. That's all. I just wanted to be a part of the fun And then immediately I was I was reminded of how little I actually know about international soccer. Now, I did think about heeding your suggestion and deleting the tweet, but I said, no, I'm having more fun in the replies than I am watching the soccer game at this point. So, not my finest moment. And perhaps I should have, in fact, actually checked my notes before being very condescending in the checks notes.
Let me put this in your terms as a college basketball fan. That'd be like somebody parachuting in and seeing that Tennessee lost to Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament. Oh, man, at least it wasn't against a super like Gonzaga, a school of like 800 people that hasn't climbed that mountain yet of winning a national championship, but you get what I'm saying.
I regret nothing. I just wanted to celebrate the 4th of July earlier. I've never felt more patriotic than very, very quickly displaying my international ignorance on the internet for everybody to see. So, yes, I am the thing that made everybody say, oh, no. Go ahead, Jackson.
All right, number one, Sounds game, July 10th against the Iowa Cubs. This week, I believe the Sounds are in Memphis playing the Redbirds.
Okay.
My oh no is Ryan McDonough. So he was traded to the Lightning last month, and when that trade was announced, obviously the NHL.com gets quotes from him, and he mentioned how excited he was to play with Steven Stamkos again about 3 times in the article. And I find it funny that, how excited he is to play with Steven Stamkos. Steven Stamkos passing him on I-40 when he's heading out of town, Stamkos heading into town.
Tough.
It's really tough.
That wasn't as bad as you made it out to be. I like that one.
Not my worst.
I do think a big part of it too was to move back to Tampa, a place his family loved and cherished. But yes, I'm sure he was very much looking forward to being reunited with Stamkos.
Yeah, understandably so. All right, for the opportunity to win some Sounds tickets, as long as John doesn't cuss at us, he's probably going to win. John is up first. Hey, buddy.
Hey, guys, what's going on? Thanks for taking the call. My old no is the Los Angeles Clippers. As a Lakers fan for years, I've heard, there's another team in L.A., and they traded away the farm to get Paul George, and now they've lost him for practically nothing. So that is my oh no. Thanks for taking it.
Well, appreciate the call. Stay on hold, and Jackson will... he immediately dropped.
And he's gone.
Who do we give the tickets to?
Find out next.
It is 11:01. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. The Nashville Predators stole the show on day one of NHL free agency, bringing in multiple star players, including Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea on multi-year deals. The Preds also added backup goaltender Scott Wedgwood from Dallas and extended defenseman Alexander Carrier. Steven Stamkos met with the media yesterday and said the decision was made by he and his family just yesterday morning.
It certainly went pretty fast, but like I said, we're so excited to be part of this amazing franchise. Obviously, we saw what happened today with some of the other signings, so a great day to be a Nashville Predators fan, and like I said, very, very excited to be part of that.
NBA free agency continues on. Shortly after winning the championship, Celtics star Jason Tatum has signed the largest contract in NBA history with a 5-year, $314 million extension. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Second hour is upon us. We have a fun summer segment that I think we're going to get into. Is Bert going to make an appearance on the show?
I guess. I don't see him anywhere.
No, well, that doesn't mean that he's not already in the studio if past experiences tell us anything. I just assume he sleeps here at night. I assume that he doesn't go home. I assume that when Cheyenne gets fed up with him, I assume she locks him out of the house and he has to sleep under this console, which is how he jump scares me so frequently.
There is a pillow and blanket down here.
Well, I will deal with Bert's garbage later here in about 20 minutes from now. Literally deal with his garbage in about 20 minutes from now. We'll explain more in just a second. But there was a good tweet from a friend of mine last night on the heels of the U.S. men's That's Not Fair. Marcel Louis-Jacques is a friend of mine. That's not fair.
Who is he?
He's the Dolphins ESPN reporter. Is that fine-worthy?
Just say that, though. Just say that. Just say that. People will identify with that. Why do you have to say he's a friend of mine?
Because that's how I know him. I don't know him because of his Dolphins coverage. I know him because I see him at the Combine at Prime 47 every year.
Why? Because he covers the Dolphins.
Go ahead and find me for that.
Because he covers the Dolphins.
Maybe.
You just want people to know that you're friends with him.
With the Dolphins ESPN reporter, yes, I'm really trying to grift off that Dolphins clout. Actually, that is one NFL beat that I would hesitate to take. Not because of anything to do with Miami, but because Dolphins fans are insane around the Tua stuff. Insane.
Really? After the football you've watched for the last 2 years, you wouldn't want to be a part of that track meet every Sunday? Be pretty fun.
I'd think about it. Either way. So, he put out a tweet last night, big soccer fan, Marcel, to the effect of that loss. Well, not the loss specifically, the experience this year in Copa America, because again, and this had to be explained to me because I was not, it's like the Shaq meme. I was not familiar with Uruguay's game as an international superpower when I was making jokes about them being an international superpower. Turns out they are. But the experience in Copa America, the U.S. hosting Copa America, and then crashing out before even the elimination round is about as big an international embarrassment as U.S. soccer could have sustained, correct?
There's worse, but we can get into it.
Recency, yeah. Well, there's worse, which is why this tweet is interesting. This is from Marcel Louis-Jacques, Marcel_LJ on Twitter. The U.S. men's national team missing knockout rounds on home soil, important to note, again, home soil, is on the Mount Rushmore of embarrassing American international sports failures. We're in the most important 3-year stretch in U.S. soccer history. Something drastic needs to change before the World Cup. Of course, the World Cup going to be on American soil in 2026. Famously, Nashville not going to be a part of it. Although, is there talk of us hosting at least practice grounds?
In Nashville?
For teams? Or in Tennessee?
In Chattanooga,
okay.
Yes. Chattanooga will be a training ground for teams that are playing in Atlanta.
I thought I had seen that. But either way. So Nashville missing out on the opportunity to host because of the stadium. Lack of clarity at the time. Since then, the stadium project has obviously moved forward, but still would not be done by 2026. Now, we fight the idea of doing sports Mount Rushmores at any point as a show. We have famously, and it's, again, we don't fault other people for doing them. I just don't love them, so I try to avoid them when I can, except for this one, because this one seems kind of fun. Even if it is pointing and laughing at one of some of the most embarrassing American international sports failures. So, if I present to you, again, not the Uruguay loss, but the loss to Panama and the Copa America experience this year, with only 4 slots available on a Mount Rushmore of international American sports embarrassments, how would you put this on your Mount Rushmore of international embarrassments for American sports teams?
I would, because of the stage and the significance of the World Cup coming to the United States for the first time since 1994. Reminder that the U.S. kind of gave a good account of themselves in 1994. And that the U.S. was thought of as a nothing country in terms of soccer. It was still 2 years removed from the inauguration of Major League Soccer when we hosted the World Cup in 94. Yet we got out of the group stage. We beat one of the best teams in the world at the time in the group stage in Colombia. And fast forward to now, this country should be in a much better place and is in terms of the talent level. And they have not looked like more than the sum of their parts under Berhalter. They have not once surpassed expectations, and last night they fell significantly below expectations. So I would put last night, this Copa America experience and missing out on the 2018 World Cup, both as 2 of those 4 on the Mount Rushmore. There's 4, right? On the Mount Rushmore of worst international American sports moments. Just checking.
Quick, name the 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore right now.
Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, Abe Lincoln, George Washington.
You Googled it.
Woo! No, I did not. I swear to God. But last night even does not meet the feeling of numbness and devastation from missing the 2018 World Cup.
Sure.
Because you couldn't beat Trinidad and Tobago in a qualifier.
You had me thinking that Uruguay was Trinidad and Tobago last night, to be honest with you. I had no idea. I was not familiar with their game. Now I am. Thank you, Internet. Sometimes the best way to learn is public shame.
But what else is on there?
Definitely the 2004 U.S. men's basketball team in Olympic competition that required the Redeem team in 2008 to go to Beijing and win the gold. So if for those of you who don't remember, Larry Brown was the head coach of the U.S. Olympic team at the time. The Americans were favored to win the gold medal. They had won the tournament, I want to say the previous 3 Olympics, but they won bronze in 2004. They lost 3 games against opponents, the most games ever lost by a U.S. men's Olympic basketball team. And it's not like it was a bunch of slaps. Like that has come under criticism in the last couple of years, like who we're fielding on the Olympic basketball teams. Year in and year out, that was LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Carlos Boozer, Dwayne Wade, Stephon Marbury, Allen Iverson, Sean Marion, Amari Stoudemire, Tim Duncan, Lamar Odom, and Richard Jefferson, who's more famous for television than he was for basketball. But still,
loaded team.
Lost
to Argentina, who, of course, was led by Manu Ginobili and had a handful of NBA players. But
they lost to not just Argentina, they lost to Lithuania?
No, they beat Lithuania in the bronze medal game.
They lost, so they won, right, but there was a second game. That was the second game against Lithuania.
Did they play Lithuania in the group stage?
Correct. So in group play, they lost to Puerto Rico.
Wow.
92-73. They then beat Greece and Australia, lost to Lithuania by 4 points, beat Angola and Spain, who typically has solid national teams, lost to Argentina, and then beat Lithuania in order to win the bronze, to make sure that they medaled.
Yeah, they barely beat Lithuania. I mean, it was a
104-96.
Yeah. So, wow. I didn't realize they lost to Lithuania in the group stage.
Correct.
And Puerto Rico.
I'm trying to think of